told you I was going to slow down, and we're going to take some time on Daniel 7. It's very heavy prophetically, so we're beginning it today. And to begin it, I want to read aloud the entire chapter for two reasons. I'm concerned that some people don't read the chapter in advance, and that's important. Number two, it brings context, because the slides I've prepared so far, I've got about 80 slides prepared in PowerPoint for Daniel 7. And I'm only covering the first 7 verses. So there's 28 verses in the chapter. We've got a lot to do, and we'll be on it a number of weeks. And you will learn a lot. You will learn a lot. So beginning in Daniel chapter 7, verse 1, we'll read together here. I'll read aloud. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. And 4 great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and its body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom that, praise the Lord, and all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me to know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them. until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down, and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise. And another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first. And he shall subdue 3 kings. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times, and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance was changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Lots in there. Lots in there. Let me close this and go to our lesson. The chapter is about a vision that God gave to Daniel. And in this chapter, there are 4 beasts. By the way, in your handout, if you think you've missed an answer, get with me afterwards or raise your hand and I'll give you the answers. I filled them out real quickly for myself here before we started. But in this vision, there are 4 beasts. The word beast in the King James Version of the Bible usually refers to a created being of some kind, but not an angel and not a human being. Well, no, that's not true. But not an angel. We would say that, not an angel. It's some kind of a created being. And by saying beast, we usually think of an animal of some kind. That's fine. But basically, the word means some created being with a kind of a pejorative or bad intent to it. Bad intent to it. Not always. But our job in Daniel chapter 7 is to learn all we can about these 4 beasts. And that is number 2 on your handout. All we can to learn about these 4 beasts. All right, moving on. So we looked at verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream, visions of his head upon his bed. And he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Now, in saying that, let's think about where we are. The first year of Belshazzar. Anybody remember Belshazzar from what we've already seen in our study? Where was he? What was he? King of Babylon, and he's the one that saw the what on the wall? Writing on the wall. Okay. This first year of Belshazzar was in 553 BC. This is not important, to get meaning from the scripture, but it just kind of helps you to set yourself in this whole thing chronologically. Belshazzar's father was named Nabonidus. Now, some people pronounce that Nabonidus. I don't care how you pronounce it. Nabonidus is probably correct. I've just always said Nabonidus, and I can't change now. But Nabonidus began ruling in 556 BC. 3 years after he began his rule, he gave the kingdom over to his son Belshazzar, and Nabonidus went off on his religious things where he was promoting the worship of the goddess named Sin, and such a hilarious name for an idol. It's promoting the worship of the goddess Sin, and just trying to change the religion of Babylon. And this verse account of Nabonidus is actually, that's a picture of it. It has survived all these 2,700 years, and you can still look at it and read it if you can read the Babylonian cuneiform and Aramaic. but that's it anyway. So that's where we are. Belshazzar has been given rule, and Nabonidus did it after he'd been in ruling for 3 years, and now Belshazzar is the ruler. Babylon will fall to the Persians about 10 years from then. But that was the writing on the wall episode we had in chapter 5. So that brings us up to date. That kind of shows you where we are in the whole chronology of this. So Daniel says, he wrote the whole dream and told us some of the matters. So he's telling us, we're going to get, from what he's telling us, we're going to get the main facts, the summary. But we're not going to get all the little details that he might have learned from having this dream or having the angel explain it to him. We're going to get the summary of it. Many of the details can be ferreted out from other Bible study that you can do. And as a matter of fact, if you get familiar with what's happening in Daniel and you move yourself over to the book of Revelation, the last book in the New Testament, you will fill in lots of detail from Revelation. And we're going to show you that as we go. That's one thing that slows us down a little bit here, is to understand Daniel fully. We've got to look at the book of Revelation, which comes back and fills in some of our understanding gaps in Daniel. And we're going to do that. We're going to be going back and forth quite a bit, as a matter of fact. Maybe not quite a bit, but sufficiently to get the main ideas. Verse 2, so Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heaven strove about upon the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Let's look at this word, the great sea. The four winds of the heaven strove upon the great sea. There's a lot of symbolism in this vision of Daniel. It was a dream. It was a vision. And so it's very symbolic. There's lots of things that we see in the vision that don't actually exist on the earth in their actual form. I mean, this thing that looks like a bear doesn't actually exist. It's a symbol, and it teaches us something about the kingdom. Now, this business of the great sea, Bible scholars, and we always like to say Bible scholars, whoever they are, right? But Bible scholars usually accept the meaning of this as meaning sinful humanity all over the world. The great sea, the sea of humanity. We sometimes even use that term. The great sea, not the Mediterranean Sea, literally, but the sea of humanity. Revelation 17:15 shows us how that's used. Speaking of the great whore of Babylon, it says, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, because she sat on the sea, the waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. So there's a clue for us from the New Testament to help us understand the Old, that when we see waters under one of these individuals, we often are looking at humanity, peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. There are many other scriptures where this is explained too. But for our class, I'm just using the one, and in your study, you can look and find the others without great difficulty. So these four beast kingdoms that are coming are produced by people out of the sea of humanity. These are human kingdoms that come up out of the sea of humanity. The four winds of the heaven, there's another term that's interesting, we want to understand, that strove upon the great sea. The four winds often represent the entire known world in Scripture. Now, this is kind of obvious to many of us. We often talk about the four compass points, the four winds. We understand that it means something that's worldwide, and that's how it's used in the Scriptures too. Matthew 24:31, speaking of the rapture, I believe, it says, he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to another. Everywhere on the face of the earth, the believers are going to be gathered up. And so there's that way the term, the four winds, is used. So that's what we're looking at here. That's what we're looking at here in Daniel chapter 7. And there's a hint in this about this word strove now. There's a hint in this about when these kingdoms exist. It doesn't prove anything yet, but it's interesting, and it gets us to thinking. If these four kingdoms if the water is splashing up these four kingdoms and they're rising up out of the sea, are they coming up at different times? Like, is there one historically here and another one historically coming up here, and then later on another one coming up here, or another one coming up here over 1,000 or more years? Or are they all coming up at the same time? That's an interesting thing to think about now, because the four winds are striving all upon the great sea, throwing this water up all at one time. I got some different versions of the Bible just to look at this phrase and give us a little more maybe insight into it. The New King James reads, instead of the word strove, it says the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, stirring it up. The revised version, the old one from 1901. The four winds of the heaven break forth upon the great sea, just wham, like this, like a tsunami hitting. The Jewish Publication Society, not a Christian translation, but just a translation. The four winds of the heaven broke forth upon the great sea. Same idea, no real difference. And then the English Standard Version, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. So the first and the last were stirring up, the middle two were breaking forth. It's all the same idea, The winds are just stirring up the water, and there's a lot going on. It's like a churning. There's a Bible commentary named the New American Commentary. A guy named Stephen Miller gives this idea some insight, some weight. He says, the four winds of heaven were churning up the sea. By the way, has anybody ever seen a churn that you churn milk in? How many? Oh, that many? Have you ever seen one used? Okay, I thought I was the only one old enough for this. All right, because I remember my grandmother had one of these things. You didn't.
I got a question. So you use that to turn milk into butter? Right?
Yeah.
I know what it is. I used to.
Yeah, you did?
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Yeah, I remember my grandmother had one, and she was using it one time, and I thought, that's probably the only time I've ever seen one used when I was a little kid. I thought, at the time, you think, big deal. That's what grandmothers do. Yeah, I thought. But my wife's a grandmother, and she doesn't do that, so things change. All right. But he says, the four winds of heaven, I'm sorry, rabbit trail. The four winds of heaven were churning up the sea. Just like this. You're just churning that. And it's just like this all the time. The part is in a time of sudden storm. The participle churning up can also mean a bursting forth. And the idea seems to be that these winds suddenly burst forth upon the sea. So it seems like it's all happening at one time, and I believe that it is. And I'll take later on, you'll see why I think that's important. So all this seems to indicate that the four kingdoms exist at the same time. Keep that in mind as we continue. And I have a viewpoint on this that I'm going to promote in this lesson that will become obvious soon. So the four beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. Each one was different than the one that preceded it. And the one that was last was totally different than all the rest, as a matter of fact. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. So let's look at it pictorially here. We're going to do a lot with pictures because I think it helps us to focus our minds. Daniel's vision of the churning sea. Here he is sleeping, having this night vision. The sea is churning. He's dreaming, and now we're going to see his dream. The four beasts are coming. Does that not sound ominous, right? The four beasts are coming. They're coming up out of the sea. Have you ever been on a boat or a cruise ship and been in a storm where all this has been going on? That's like our murder mystery thing coming up. We're going to have a storm too, but it's just scary because the boat's rocking, and it's a way to feel really small, really helpless, really fast. Okay, because your boat's out there just doing all this. Out of the sea comes the first beast. The first was like a lion, had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth and made stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given to it. Later on. Not in this lesson today. We will discuss what it means to have the wings plucked and the various things that were said about it. For now, we're just dealing with the fact that it was lion-like. That was the first beast. The second beast came up, and behold, another beast, a second like to a bear, not a bear, but like to a bear. And it raised up itself on one side, and it had 3 ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. Tells you something about that kingdom. And there it was. The third, after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. By the way, do you see the 4 heads here? Are they clear enough? Do you see the 4 wings of the fowl? No, there's only 2. Artists make mistakes, okay? Artists do a really good job with many things. In this case, the guy really messed up because he only gave it 2 wings and it should have had 4. Unless I'm missing some and there's some little tiny things in there, but I don't, some little fairy wings. Okay, but I'm not seeing any in there. So sometimes the artwork isn't perfect, but the idea is there. I just think that's funny. Okay, and then the fourth beast, after this in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. Just an ugly looking thing. Just an ugly looking thing.
I like that.
Very nice. So there's the four beasts. There's the four beasts. And Daniel's having this dream. All of us dream, I think. Probably all of us would say we dream. When you have a dream like this, you might think of something like this as a nightmare, or now people like to say, call it a night terror, right? And you wake up and you think, wow, what was that? In Daniel's case, he knew it wasn't either one of those things. He knew it was a vision from God. And that's why he was concerned about it, concerned greatly. Among conservative Bible students, and we are those, meaning we believe the Bible, we believe it is true, it has no error in it, it's there for us to learn and study and allow the Holy Spirit to teach us from. So among conservative Bible students, there's two main views of this vision and what it means. There's the traditional view, that's in your handout, by the way. There's the traditional view, and there's a contemporaneous view. And we're going to look at those two real quickly here. The traditional view, in short, says that the vision mirrors the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, the one he had in chapter 2. You remember Nebuchadnezzar's dream that Daniel came and interpreted from him in the first time that Nebuchadnezzar called him? He had the head of gold. He had that image, and he was wondering about it. It had the head of gold, and then the chest and arms of silver, the belly and thighs of brass, the legs of iron, and the feet with mixed iron and clay. And Nebuchadnezzar was troubled by that. He knew it was a vision from God. And Daniel explained it to him. They say, well, the traditional view typically says the vision of Daniel's four beasts in chapter 7 is the same as the vision of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2. The four things all match up together. I don't particularly buy that myself, but I'm teaching it because it's so common. Let's look at it this way in text. Chapter 2. In chapter 2, we had the head of gold. Daniel said to Nebuchadnezzar, "Thou art this head of gold." So we know that was Babylon. That means that the lion in chapter 7, according to the traditional view, represents Babylon. And people that would, well, I'll say later why they would say this. In chapter 2, we had then the chest of silver. They'll say, okay, then the chest of silver represents the bear. They're the same thing. In Daniel chapter 2, we had the loins of brass. And they say, okay, in chapter 7, the leopard is the same thing. Now, to my mind, I'm not seeing a lot of consonants between these two. I'm not seeing a lot of similarities in these things. But it's a convenient way to look at it, and it's just very common. In chapter 2, we had the legs of iron, the feet of iron and clay. They say, okay, that's the same as the 10-horned beast. At least there, we have 10 toes and 10 horns, okay? But I don't see much in common beyond that. But that's the traditional view. That is the view you'll get from Tim LaHaye, and the view you'll get from Hal Lindsey. Hal Lindsey, the late great Planet Earth book back in the 80s. That's the kind of view you'll get there. Now, we have no problem with understanding that from Daniel chapter 2 only, that yes, the head of gold was Babylon. Yes, the chest of silver was Medo-Persia. The Bible actually reveals this to us. When Daniel was given the interpretation, he said as much. He said the loins of brass will be Greece. The Grecian armies will come, and they'll be in Greece. In the legs of iron, the feet of iron and clay are going to be Rome. The Bible didn't specifically say Rome, but we know clearly from history that's what it was. So Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, 4 successive empires and kingdoms. Now going to chapter 7, the traditional people would say, yes, the same thing. The lion is Babylon, the bear is Medo-Persia, the leopard is Greece, and the 10-horned beast is Rome. 4 successive historical kingdoms over many, many years. Not all at once, but over many, many years. You're wondering, why am I belaboring this? Well, it's important to understand how this all goes together, because it informs us on how to read the rest of the chapter and how to understand it. There are some similarities here that I'll bring up that the traditionalists would use. They say, well, we know that it was Babylon in chapter 7, that lion is Babylon, because at the Ishtar gate, there are lions that are actually emblazoned and in bas relief on the Ishtar gate. And you can see lions there. Yes, there are lions there. There are also other animals, and lions happen to be in the minority, but there are lions there. That's not enough to prove anything to me here. Matter of fact, if we're going to go by this making lions the symbol of Babylon, then we have to say that bears are the symbol of Medo-Persia, and the leopard is the symbol of Greece, and Rome had a 10-horned beast that was its symbol, and those things don't work. It would only work for Babylon. The bear, they say, well, the bear was raised up on one side, showing that that was Medo-Persia, because Persia was stronger and the Medes were weaker. I need more than that. Okay, I need more than that. They say, what about Greece, the leopard? Well, the leopard, here's a good one. The leopard has 4 heads. And we know that when Alexander the Great died, after about 10 or 12 years, his 4 generals took over that empire, and the empire broke up into 4 pieces. That makes the most sense of all to me, if I'm going to be a traditionalist. But it's not enough for me. And then the 10-horned beast. Okay, we have the 10 horns, we have the 10 toes. There's our similarity there. Let's keep going with this though, and let's consider not the tradition. I got to review here in pictures. Babylon, the head of gold, the lion. Medo-Persia in the traditional view, the chest of silver, the bear. Greece, the loins of brass, the leopard. Rome, the 10 horn, the legs of iron and feet of iron and clay, and the 10-horned beast. That's traditional. Now, let's look at the contemporaneous view. The contemporaneous view says, no, these kingdoms all came together and they came up at the same time. That means that the lion is not Babylon at all, but it's something that's still yet to come. Babylon was shown in Revelation chapter 2, in Daniel chapter 2, but not in Daniel chapter 7. It's a different beast. The lion kingdom is yet to come. Same with Medo-Persia. The bear is a kingdom, but it's not Medo-Persia. It's something that's yet to come. Medo-Persia was in chapter 2. The bear is in chapter 7. These are different visions. Same with Greece. Greece showed up in chapter 3, but it's not the same as the leopard in chapter 7. And the last, the 10-horned beast. We say it's not Rome. Rome was in chapter 2, yes, but that's not necessarily Rome in chapter 7. Say, why is that important? Why even belabor this? Because it tells us what to expect from these 4 kingdoms. Here's the contemporaneous view. We've got the lion, the contemporaneous meaning all at the same time. The lion, the bear, the leopard, and the 10-horned beast kingdoms. The contemporaneous view says that all these kingdoms come together at the same time. And then as we continue to read in Daniel 7, and you might remember us from reading the text just a few minutes ago, that 10-horned beast in the lower right-hand corner eventually begins through war to take over and subsume and capture the other 3 kingdoms. Little by little, one after a time. Well, I should say it's not little by little because it happens in the space of a relatively few years and months. But he eventually comes to take over the whole works, and he becomes the kingdom that rules the entire world. That is Antichrist's kingdom. That is Antichrist's kingdom. And I'll show you that as we go through. But I wanted to get this idea in your head that these 4 beasts, if you view them as traditional, in the traditional view, they had to have been successive empires over many years. But if you looked at them as contemporaneous, all one king, all one thing, coming together and being ruled by Antichrist through his wars, then they make a lot more sense. And I think that you fulfill the scripture in this. One huge reason for believing that all these kingdoms exist at the same time isn't just some guy's opinion, all right? It's not. But let's skip ahead briefly to verses 11 and 12 of Daniel chapter 7. Here's what we're going to see. Daniel chapter 7, verses 11 and 12, describe the Antichrist himself being thrown into the lake of fire after his reign is completed. You say, well, I didn't read the lake of fire in there. I'll show you what we're talking about here. No conservatives really debate this point. This is generally agreed. But here we go. But after Antichrist is thrown into the fire, you'll see that the three previous beasts or kingdoms are still present, still on the earth. If we're talking about New Testament times, we're talking about even after they are thrown into the lake of fire, and as you're approaching the millennium, these three kingdoms still exist in some form at that time. If they were historical kingdoms, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, that wouldn't be possible. It just couldn't happen. Let's look at the scripture. Verse 11. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which her horn spake, and I beheld even till the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. I'll show you in a minute that giving to the burning flame is literally the lake of fire. I'll show you that in a minute. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away. But look here. Their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. That's not the same as a time, times, and a half time, right? That's a much shorter time. It's a year and maybe some months is what it looks like to me. If a time is a year. But so these other beasts, altogether, their dominion is taken away. Their power to exercise their control is taken away. But they exist as entities for a season and a time. Now that's the end of my rabbit trail. By the way, that's Peter Rabbit, if any of you hadn't recognized him. Let's look in the Word of God and see what these beasts are all about. Let's see what they're all about. You like my rabbit? Who likes my rabbit? Okay. It's one of these chainsaw rabbits. The guy did it with a chainsaw. I know. Chainsaw bunnies. It's 10:13. Wow. I think I'm going to quit here. We'll pick this up next week, and we'll continue with this. And I told you I'd show you about how that is the lake of fire. We'll get to that next week.